May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be aligned with your love, O God, our strength, our courage, our freedom, and our new song. Amen. I like to begin sermons with stories. The story with which I begin this sermon this morning is a story from my own life. I've chosen the story of my week this past week because the story's arc brought me to the theme of this morning's sacred text. If I had to give you the 10 most important texts from the entire Bible today, today's assigned reading would be at the top of the list. It's called the greatest commandment. According to Jesus, the greatest commandment of all the commandments is love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second commandment is likened to it, love your neighbor as yourself. So here's the story. I began the week working with trusted staff colleagues, inspiring All Saints leaders, and 4 dedicated effective facilitators, learning and relearning a particular model we use here at All Saints for recognizing, appreciating, and in fact celebrating differences. Differences in race, in gender, in sexual orientation, in religious and cultural backgrounds, differences in feelings and in worldviews. This model, which we teach and learn here at All Saints, is called Visions, which stands for Vigorous Interventions and for I like the vigorous intervention part. And for 15 years, we've been learning and trying to live by this model as a way of dismantling both within ourselves and between us in our relationships and in our institution here and in our wider culture, any vestiges of racism, sexism, homophobia, and other forms of oppression. But most deeply of all, trying to develop skills in appreciating how important it is to feel safe in a faith community like this, having differences of opinion, realizing that the whole truth is a truth that accommodates a both and rather than an either or approach to absolutely every situation. So it's applauded when you disagree with the rector. Now, because this model of recognizing and appreciating difference in groups of people recognizes the importance of not only thinking and acting, but thinking and acting and feelings as well. So we honor feelings as messengers that come to us and tell us what we need. For instance, if you feel scared, there's probably a real or an imagined threat. Or if you feel sad, there's probably a loss. And on and on and on. I could go into all of that very deeply, but suffice it to say at this point that when you are in settings where feelings are honored, a variety of feelings get acknowledged, and acknowledging and honoring feelings can be challenging for someone, let's say a white male from the South, who hasn't so easily trekked in the feelings of anger, sadness, and scare, because as a little boy, everything was supposed to be pleasing and joyful and peaceful. But I did it this past week in a concentrated way for 3 days at the beginning of this week. Then rather than this week being a kind of a regularly full week that we have at All Saints, it was an intensely All Saints full week. At one point, I called my wife from my car, and she said, "How's it going?" And I said, "I needed to hear your voice. I've had more challenges than normal this week. And at the same time, I have felt more deeply than ever before that this is the work I was wired by God to do. And I'm exhilarated and challenged." Now, there's a both-and statement if there ever was one. So now to close out this story so I can get on to the point of the sermon. My work also included a heartbreaking conversation with a woman who needed to work through her spiritual abuse from a parent who had adopted fundamentalistic thinking, who had told her that her being lesbian was not pleasing to God and that God would punish her if she didn't get things right. This person in my office wanted to account for her distaste for the word God because God had been presented to her as punitive and coercive, and she wanted to explore other options for pointing to the source of all being, and that might be a way for her and me to communicate better. Later, I visited someone who sat on the sofa of her home with me, and she physically trembled, describing the sexual abuse she had suffered. Later in the week, 8 other interfaith religious leaders and I had a heart-to-heart conversation with District Attorney Jackie Lacey about mass incarceration and how the scene of mass incarceration must change from treating those with mental illness and drug addiction through incarceration, and that we must stop the racial inequities with which mass incarceration is administered in this country. And then I raced back to Pasadena to have the great honor of sitting with a couple at the deathbed of her mother. There were other challenges that are too intimate to mention in a sermon. However, at one point, it just occurred to me to sit in my prayer chair and say as a mantra, as I brought up all of those people and all those situations in my imagination, to say at every turn, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Now, my friends, this is a change for me. That always would not have been my prayer. There was a time in my life that I was bound in a reward-punishment frame for understanding Christianity. I had bought that the way to understand Christianity was to see human beings as having fallen from grace, and that we lived discontinuously from God because of the fall. And I would have been praying a prayer about whether I got it right, asking God to save me from my sin. But somewhere along my journey, deepened here at All Saints Church, I learned a different frame for religion than rewards and punishments. Breaking out throughout Christian theology these days is the notion that all of us have been given a new song, a new frame, and that is the song and frame of unity, or as Richard Rohr calls it, the unitive mystery of divine love. It is a song that says that all of us came from love, my favorite word for God. All of us bear the divine image. Everything in creation illustrates the one divine mystery, and we are all returning to our source, which is love. That is a unity frame, not a reward and punishment frame. It is an everything and everyone belongs frame. And the reason that you and I love and are called to love is not in order to earn God's love. You and I are called to love to express the love that made us and that is in us and that is us. You and I are made of love stuff. We have love energy. That's our true self. And when we realize that love is living in us and through us, that is exactly how you and I plug into a much larger mind and heart beyond our own. No longer do we have to live in a small mind that excludes and punishes and is biased. No longer do we have to live in a false self. No longer do we have to live in a rewards and punishment mind. You and I can live in a large mind, our true self mind, the Christ mind, God's mind, which includes and heals and transforms, because it's all grace, before, during, and after. The entire universe is about connection and relationship. From the smallest atom to the galaxies and everything in between. As that hymn just sang, love has taught us that we belong, safe within love's tender keeping, safe from fear's persistent call, love defending, love unending, love of God enfolding all. Oh yes, sin and evil exist. Sin and evil threaten and seduce. But we need to understand that sin and evil emerge when any of us try to stand outside of the circle of unity and connection. Whenever I get to be in a small group or a larger group of members of this parish and I get to ask the question, what brought you here and what keeps you here? Invariably, the answer to the question, what keeps you here, is this mantra that we say every Sunday. And I bet you know exactly what it is. And I bet you can join me in saying it as soon as I say the first word. Whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on the journey of faith, you are welcome here. Everyone belongs. I've had a strong fall for weddings and a strong fall for people writing their wedding vows. And I'm going to quote to you from a wedding vow that was made right here in this spot yesterday afternoon at a wedding that I officiated at. Now, can you imagine? Here is a brilliant astrophysicist, beginnings of life PhD, who works at JPL, holding his bride's hand and saying these, among other words. I ask you to join me in building a new family and in creating a new story. I offer you my awakening heart and my commitment to open it further to you at every opportunity, to choose love over fear right now and for the rest of our lives, right here at the center of our infinite universe of staggering beauty and terrifying uncertainty. I join my fortune to yours. I had a glory attack. This commandment, which Jesus said is the greatest, I have for a long time thought of as an equilateral triangle. It is a call to love God with all your heart, to love your neighbor, and to love yourself. As you who've studied geometry know that you can't keep an equilateral triangle if one side of the triangle gets shorter or longer. In order for it to maintain its equilateral nature, all the other sides either have to shrink or expand with that one. So the way I theologically reflect on this greatest commandment is, if you start loving God less, you're going to be able to love yourself less, and you are going to shrink your love of other people. If you start loving other people less, you're going to love yourself and God less. If you start loving yourself less, you're going to love God less and other people less. But if you start loving other people more, then your love for God is going to expand and your love for yourself is going to expand. Or if you start loving yourself more, you're going to start loving God more or other people more. If you start loving God more, you're going to start loving yourself or loving other people more. You're going to expand to the big mind. Today is our last day for people to pledge in church. And all of this is about love and all of our life, including our money. The more you give love away, the more capacity do you have for receiving love. It's the same case with our resources. Imagine you and me making a similar kind of vow, not exactly the same vow, but saying to one another and through our giving to all saints to the world, I ask you to join me in creating a new story. Church, world, universe, I offer you my awakening heart and my commitment to open it further to you at every opportunity, to choose love over fear, right now and for the rest of our lives, right here at the center of our infinite universe of staggering beauty and terrifying uncertainty. I join my fortune to yours. That is what we do when we pledge a proportion of our resources here so that All Saints Church can do great things, not just for our own spiritual jollies. That's fine to come here and get your spiritual fuel, get your tank filled up for the week at the service station of God. But that's not the only thing we do here. We are giving, we are pooling our resources, we are pledging our fortune, we are joining our fortunes to one another so that we can provide spiritual healing and transformation to people who come in here who we don't know, and not only for right this year and next year, but for 20 and 25 years from now, when some of us won't be here and some stranger will come and say, thank God those people in 2014 made a pledge for the 2015 budget. We are called to love. We are called to wholeness. We are called to the great big mind. Do so by giving in gratitude and generosity. Amen.